Hi, my name is Justine Jones and this is my brand new podcast, Starting Over, where I will be meeting celebrities, everyday people and experts and finding out what happened in their life when they needed to start over. We'll be giving you lots of advice on sobriety, on starting a new career, relationship breakdowns. There's so much to unpack here. I hope you can join us whether you need to start over or whether you just want to tune in. Please join us on this new podcast. A huge thank you to the sponsor of this series, Lost Sheep Coffee, who have provided us with the most amazing mocha iced coffees, lattes, and they also do their own coffee beans. Give them a like and a follow, because without them, this podcast wouldn't be possible, and they're fabulous. Okay, the first ever episode of Starting Over, the podcast. And the reason I wanted to do this was because 9 years ago, I really had to start over. So today joining me is Nicola Massie, consultant counselling psychologist. And we're going to go through relationship breakdowns. It's quite difficult to talk about. I've typed it on social media, which is much easier than sat here talking about it. 9 years ago, my marriage broke down and I saw myself as a single mum, mid-30s, in a little council house, full-time cleaning, dog walking, house sitting, waitressing, working behind the bar, just doing anything I could to keep afloat with the boys. And it was a position that I never thought I would ever see myself in. From the outside, myself and my ex-husband had the sort of fairy tale marriage, 2 healthy, lovely boys, and a lovely house. And the reality was that we were both really struggling, both in different places, and it just wasn't working. And we were both really miserable, and it became quite toxic. So for me, it was starting over, and it was a really difficult time. And I had so many messages when I put this publicly from people personally and privately, because obviously some people don't want to say they're going through it. And lots of people commenting saying, you admitting how you felt going through that really helped me. I talked very openly about the loneliness, about the sadness, the grief of the loss of the relationship, the sense of failure, the sense that I'd let my children down, to see them with their little overnight bags. Oh, I find this really hard. To see them with their little overnight bags going back and forth between mum and dad's houses was so hard. And I can't even put into words how much that tore me apart, because that was never the dream. And I never wanted that for them. I was from what people would say a broken home. And my home was now broken, and my world, my 2 little boys' home was broken, and it was the toughest time. The loneliness, the sleepless nights, the not eating. I couldn't even eat. I felt so physically sick all the time. And to sit in front of you now, I look back and I know I would have so benefited so much from therapy. But we chatted before, and therapy wasn't really an option for me because financially I couldn't afford it. Yeah. I probably should have gone to the GP and said I really needed it, but I didn't. If I'd come to you then, how would we have unpacked this? And what would your advice be to someone dealing with a relationship breakdown? Doesn't matter if there's not children there. It could be a relationship breakdown with a family member, a work colleague, a friend, a relationship breakdown sort of across the board.
So there are lots of different sorts of relationships, which you've already alluded to. I suppose the one that appears to have caused you the most amount of pain, obviously, is the breakdown of your marriage. And it sounds like you've really thought a lot about that already. And, thought about what you were feeling. You know, you've thought about all those things and what it meant for you. And I noticed as you were talking, you talked about grief. And I think some of the psychological theories or models around grief, when people die, because grief is a loss, they sometimes fit quite nicely thinking about the loss of a relationship, because you lose everything that you've expected. So you said that, you know, you lost your future almost
Completely,
because that wasn't how you expected your future to be. Also, you know, I sense from when you're speaking that there was a lot of guilt and regret around how this was going to work out for your children now.
Completely.
Yeah, and very practical things. You said you were living in a council house, having lived in a nice house with your husband. You had, I'm sure you had a circle of friends with your husband. That sometimes goes.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. And it's an enormous loss, and one of the most painful things that you'll experience in your life, I would imagine.
Yeah, completely.
Yeah.
Nothing has even come close to it, luckily, since.
Yeah.
But it was the idea that what I thought my life was going to be, it wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
And as much as we shouldn't have been together, I missed another person to ask advice and just to be in the house with me or be there when I came home, because I spend a lot of time coming home to an empty house.
So previously you said about breakdown of lots of sorts of relationships, and I suppose there is pain when any relationship breaks down, but talking about a marital or an emotional, a loving, intimate relationship, that I guess is more painful than if your friend at work decides not to talk to you anymore. You can
absolutely
deal with that. You think about, okay, well, I have a way of dealing with that, but this one is acutely painful.
Oh, it's so painful. It's even just talking about it now. It was 9 years ago. We've both got amazing partners, other partners now, and we've both moved on. But even just talking about it, but the one thing for me is the guilt of the children.
Okay, yeah.
Even now. And I think I'll always have that. And sometimes they'll say, it's 9 years ago, and sometimes they will say, oh, well, when you and Dad split up, and I think, oh, God, yeah, it has affected them. You try to make it not.
It's a really difficult one, because you also spoke earlier about both you and your ex-husband realising how unhappy you were and the relationship becoming toxic.
Yeah.
I guess that wasn't great for the kids if you were...
Oh, no, 100%.
If their parents were in a toxic relationship. So, it sounds like what you did was you realised that this isn't a great way to live our lives and their lives, and you had to do something about it. But that doing something about it was intensely painful, which it is. And many of the, as I said, the psychological models are very similar to the models that you would think about if somebody was grieving when somebody died, because there's that intense, that loss. I don't know how you felt right at the beginning, at the end of the relationship, but many people feel completely shocked.
Yeah.
Even though maybe you decided this isn't for us anymore. Yeah. The shock and the pain is just overwhelming.
And the roller coaster of emotions, I think in the beginning, it was a little bit like a weight off my shoulders. I wasn't living in a house with somebody that we were arguing all the time. I wasn't crying as much because I was upset in the house. There was lots of things that gave me that sense of freedom and relief. But then came the overwhelming feeling of loneliness, sadness. Yeah. What the heck has happened to my life? Oh my goodness. Like you go from living in a house with somebody with a family to just the kids with him. And I'm not there to put my children to bed. I'm not there to put them in the bath. I'm not there to ask how their day was, to sit opposite them and have dinner. I'm sat on my own on the sofa eating a crumpet and a cup of tea because I can't be bothered to make a proper dinner for myself, watching silly things on TV.
And I think that the word that fits the best is loss, because you talked about losing your marriage, but actually losing, your children around you for certain days of the week. So you lose your routine. Even though perhaps you weren't very happy, you lose not having somebody in the house with you and feeling quite lonely.
Yeah.
Which,
going home to an empty house at the end of the day. Like I would finish work and go home to this empty house, and oh my gosh, it was just over. And do you know what? One of the things that I think completely saved me was my dog.
Yeah.
Because her little face, I say I went home to an empty house. Human-wise, I did.
Yeah.
But I had this little animal whose tail wagged and was so... And I would go in and I would sit on the stairs, and she'd come and sit by the side of me on the stairs, and I'd be jumping all over me because she was so excited. She's a little Bichon Frise. And I'd just sob, and she'd be there sort of trying to lick my face because she was just like so... And it was almost... That was almost therapy for me.
And pets give you unconditional love. Dogs do.
Completely.
Complete unconditional love. They're so delighted to see you.
Yeah.
And actually, it sounds like that really met a need.
Oh, it did. You. It totally did. It was as if somebody was glad I came home.
Yeah. Well, she was.
Yeah, she was. She was like, here, dinner. And gave me a reason as well after work to not just go in, go to bed or sit on the sofa and cry. I had to take her for a walk around the block.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So actually, some of the things that you're mentioning are some of the things that I was going to come on to later about, what is a way of coping with that. So it sounds like, you've already identified that your dog, because she loves you, it met a need in you, and also you had to go out. I mean, you had to go out and get some fresh air, and I guess you may have seen the odd person along the way who said, hi.
Sometimes just hi, or even if it was just us, it was just that the endorphins, I think, with a little bit of exercise.
Definitely, absolutely.
A bit, in the summertime, it was a bit of sunshine and a bit of daylight. If I'd been, cleaning all day, or if I'd just started QVC at that point and was going up and down to there. But work was definitely something that kept me going as well. I think I needed to straight away really work, not just financially, just for me.
Yeah, and for some people that's really necessary, as you say, if you're actually living in two houses, so your income needs to be so that you can keep two houses going, or have your new single house. So that's really important. So you need to be able to go out and work. And I think one of the things that sometimes is really helpful is actually having a plan to how to manage when you have to go out, because I suppose there were days when you really didn't feel like going to QVC.
No, and I was on TV, and it was live TV, and I would cry all the way there in the car. I would get there, I would have the under eye masks on, I would slap as much makeup on as I could, put my dress on, sell, and nobody had a clue. And then I'd get back in the car, I'd wipe my face with the face wipe, drive home and cry all the way home, especially if the children weren't there when I got home.
Yeah. So did that actually help getting out and doing that work, or not?
100%.
Yeah.
It forced me out. There was QVC, which obviously is paid work, and then there was my cleaning, which both I did obviously to pay the bills. The one thing that was my therapy, I'm very much an overthinker. So I play scenarios over and over and over in my head. And that's to my detriment sometimes. Obviously it keeps you awake at night. It's not good for you.
No.
Right? And it's usually things you can't control. So you're just overplaying things that you can't do anything about. I decided to go back acting. So this was sort of 9-10 years ago, properly, and really give it a good go. And one of my friends was doing a play up in a local theatre back in my hometown of Merthyr Tydfil. And honestly, that absolutely saved me, because I would go there. And this is why I think arts are so important. As therapy. It's the ones that gets the least funding. I won't go on about that, but it does make me sad. But I went there, I got given my script, It was called From a Dark Place. It was a psychological thriller. There was 5 of us in the cast. So out of, say, 95 pages, I was in about 72 of them. So I had a lot of dialogue.
Yeah.
But I was playing Elaine, and every time I went to rehearsals, it stopped my brain overplaying Justine Jones's life, my life, and I was Elaine. And that was my moment that my brain turned off how sad I was about my life, and I stepped into somebody else's. And that acting was complete therapy for me.
And that really helped being Elaine.
Oh, being
Very
somebody
well.
else.
Yeah.
I was her. I had to think how she, whenever I think of a character, I think, right, what perfume would they wear? How would they walk? What's their posture like? How would she have her hair? So I do think quite deeply into the character because, acting I absolutely love. So I'm walking different. I've got different perfume on. My accent might be different. Her thought process, what she's going through in life is completely different. So it's as if I was stepping out of my own body and into somebody else's.
It sounds like you were distracting from the really painful feelings, giving yourself just a bit of time off from that feeling, that pain.
Is that healthy?
I think, to completely ignore it sometimes, many people do that. They ignore their anxiety, their depression for ages and ages, and then they get to a place where they can't. It sounds to me like what you might have been doing is just using it as a strategy. I can't feel this pain anymore. It's too much. The thing I really love doing is acting. I'm going to act and be Elaine today, and Elaine isn't anxious, depressed, or feeling the pain of a separation. There's a cognitive behavioural therapy technique where you might say to somebody, actually, how do you think you would be if you were happier or whatever, or less anxious?
Okay.
And they might say, oh, well, I could, if I was less anxious, I could go out for a walk down the street.
Yeah.
And then you might say, well, let's try this between now and next time. You go out for a walk down the street and be that less anxious person if you can, and then come back and tell us how you felt and how it's...
So that's almost acting.
It's actually putting yourself in a position where you're more able to deal with things. Maybe acting, yes, a little bit, but it sounds also like being Elaine was it stopped you ruminating. So going overthinking. We call it rumination. So you can get in a cycle of rumination, so you can't stop.
Horrendous. That's probably one of the things that was my weak. That was my Achilles heel, was the overplaying of every scenario, every conversation, every argument, every time we decided to go somewhere or not go somewhere. Was that it? Was that the catalyst? Should we have done this differently? Because you just, especially for me, the what ifs. And it can drive you crazy.
Yeah. And it sounds like you almost had to get off that roundabout of what ifs. And you found the way of dealing with that, which is something you love doing, which is acting. And again, if you're feeling in any situation, relationship breakup, feeling anxious, depressed, whatever, if you find something that you really, really love doing, it's worth doing as much of it as you can.
100%. And it was with lovely people. It was a safe environment. And I was also surrounded by like-minded people, so people who also loved doing that. So I think to be able to find a hobby, because that would be my biggest tip to anybody listening in the audience who is sharing the kids or has gone through a relationship breakup and they're on their own for maybe the first time in a long time. Because I was with my ex-husband for a long, long time. We were together 12 years. So when you've lived with someone or been in a relationship with somebody or, and worked in the same place for a long time, that change, that new chapter is terrifying. And that would be my biggest advice. Obviously, I'm not the expert here. Find something you love and go and do that.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And you were able to go and do some acting because that's what you do. For many people, they still have to go and work in a shop or an office or whatever. So for them, maybe it's finding something that they love doing outside work
in the evenings.
That could be enjoying watching a box set. It
doesn't have to be huge, does it?
It doesn't have to be huge. It doesn't have to, you took a really big step, but it doesn't have to be huge,
That's just me, though, I think. Throw myself in the I throw myself in the deep end and then worry if I'm going to drown once I'm in there.
Yeah. Which is great. And that's really great if you throw yourself in the deep end that, works well. But there are some deep ends you probably don't want to throw yourself into if you're feeling impulsive.
Yeah. And there's some deep ends I definitely should never have thrown myself into, and I have nearly drowned. So, for sure.
So for many people, it may be having a little bit of time, although it feels like a loss, think, well, I have got a bit of time now. I can actually take up painting or drawing or, going to the gym that I couldn't do before. And as long as it's something you enjoy doing and gives you a bit of joy and a bit of positive feedback, I think that's really, really worth doing. And as you say, a top tip, really.
And getting used to being on your own. And that was one thing, getting used to me. And I think it was learning to love me by myself and learning to love my own time. Because like my mum always says, I don't like being on my own. My mum will ring me after 2 hours. My dad's gone out somewhere. She goes, are you near? Do you want to come for a coffee? I'm on my own. She says, and she doesn't like it. No. And I think I'm very much like her. And I needed to learn to be on my own. And my other tip would be, the quicker you can do that, the better. The minute you start trying to seek pleasure and happiness in places where other people are, you will exhaust yourself, because we all need that time in our own. Even just lying in the bath for half an hour, maybe quiet or just some music on, I found that really difficult.
I mean, everybody's different. Some people like being on their own. Some people like yourself don't. So if you are going to be on your own more, and you have to be on your own more, as you say, finding a way to tolerate being on your own more, rather than, because, you said you could go and seek, people out, new friends, whatever. You might find that enjoyable, or you might still, you're still going to feel anxious, upset, whatever.
Oh, yeah, my goodness. I could be in a crowded place and somebody would look at me and go, oh, my gosh, look at her, she looks so happy. And nobody would know. And that's the other thing, isn't it? It's the mask that most of us put on, to be honest.
Yeah. And
you never know what somebody's going through behind closed doors.
No, you don't. And I think that that mask is useful sometimes when you have to go and
to work
on QVC.
Yeah.
That you had to wear that mask, didn't you? Yeah. But I suppose it is really helpful if you've got some trusted friends, people that you can trust.
Absolutely.
It might just be one person who really understands what you're going through. And that is often very helpful.
I was so lucky with that.
Yeah.
And you get friends for different things, if that makes sense.
Yes,
so I had my friend would go, come here, come and have a cry on my shoulder. I know it's so awful and you're going through this. And she would just let me cry. And then I had my other friend who was my tough love. And after about a year, she was like, right, Justine, we've all had enough of the divorce talk now. Come on, you've got to get yourself back together. And she was quite hard. And I remember going home and thinking, that was so mean. She's like, right, we've all had enough of it now, and you've had enough of it. Like, she was meaning you're repeating yourself, which is what I do. Yeah. You're repeating yourself. You're going, and he's done this, and I've done this, and he didn't pick the kids up, and da-da-da. And I was just sabotaging my mind and everything. And she just was trying to push. And I do think you definitely need different friends.
I mean, one of the things I did think about is I do think it's really helpful to maintain some respect for communication with your ex and about your ex. And it's really hard.
Oh, my gosh, it's really hard.
Really hard. Particularly important in front of your children.
Yeah, it's really difficult.
It is difficult because you've both got feelings. But if you can maintain that and hold on to a bit of respectful communication, that is probably better in the long run. But then you need your friends who you can say, he didn't pick them up or she didn't pick them up. Or
you need a rant. You need a little rant.
You need somewhere, but you have to be careful about where that is.
And how long that goes on for. Because people do, as harsh as it sounds, people get bored of it. And people get, everyone's got things going on in their life. And I was quite aware that I was going to turn into that friend that they would go, oh God, she's coming, she's moaning again now. She's going to be having a whinge about the divorce, you know. And it's like, oh my God, they're not gonna stop inviting me to things. But you know, it is such a tough time. And the other thing that I found incredibly tough, which I hadn't been used to for years and years and years, was going to certain events on my own.
Right.
And one of our best friends, Lee and Joe, got married, and when that invitation came, obviously I was completely thrilled for them, but I just wanted to run and hide because I now had to go with all our group of friends, with the sort of 5 of us girls whose children are all in school together, with all their partners. So there was, you know, just the gang of us on our own. And then one of my friends picked me up so I'm in the back of the car with a couple going to this wedding. Oh, and I just dreaded it. And it was lovely. It wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. And I don't think it ever is once you're there. It's the getting ready to go there mentally and physically.
And that sort of harks back to a little bit of what you were talking about, of actually getting comfortable with being on your own.
Yes. And confident. Yeah. So that can you do things more on your own now? Oh, 100%. Yeah. If I'm away working, which I go all over the country working, I will happily now sit in the middle of a restaurant on my own, even if I'm not looking at my phone, not looking at anything, have a little look at everyone, eat, have a drink and be absolutely fine. And I actually quite like my own space now.
Yeah, so that actually is quite a positive that you've learned that about yourself, that you can be on your own and be okay. I can
be okay. Yeah. And I've stopped catastrophizing as much because I think the shock of being on your own and the relationship breaking down does feel like everything's now going to go wrong. I did get that sense straight away. Well, if that's gone wrong, this can go wrong and this can go wrong, and I've lost my house and I've lost my marriage and I've lost everything. Will anything ever go right for me? That took me a long time.
So focusing on that negative and that loss. So
yes.
You know, it sounds like you went through a long period of only being very loss orientated, not, you know, and it took a while to get to that more positive focus on the future.
100%.
And I think, you know, what is absolutely true is this will be completely different for every single person, you know. It's a very individual thing, how you deal with it, how long it takes, how, you know, how you feel. So, you know, if you had a friend now who was going through that, they may experience some of the similar things to you, or it might be different. But it's actually to be a good friend, it would be to just listen to what the person says.
Listen.
And not expect. There's no roadmap for going through a relationship breakdown. It is as it is for that person. And it takes different amounts of time.
Of course it does. Some people get over it really quick, and I would look at people that sort of relationship are broken down. Like 6 weeks later, they're like, oh, I've met this fabulous new guy. I'm like, what?
But actually, that's probably not actually...
Do you not think?
I think that is one of the things you have to think about carefully, is your next relationship.
I wasn't ready. No. I really wasn't for a long time.
You know, the person that you talk about who's with somebody in 6 weeks' time, it might be because they just can't be on their own. They're just feeling so lonely that they rebound into another relationship. Or they might have found the person of their dreams, you know, you don't know. But actually, you know, I think it's very common. It's not a linear process where you do this, you do this, you do this. You might go back a bit, go forward a bit, go back a bit. It's very... And you know, that there might be times now or when your children are grown up and perhaps they get married and you're all a family wedding together, that you get a little pang of, oh,
yeah,
isn't it sad that we're not, you know, the family that we were?
Yeah, absolutely. I always say that, you know, if the ideal scenario would be that myself and my ex-husband were still madly in love and we all lived together and my children had their mum and dad together. But that's not the reality, and it was the acceptance.
Yeah, and so that's what I'm saying. It's accepting that you might feel like that, and, you know, one day in the future you might think, oh I'm sorry about that, but you're accepting that that's your feeling, and you feel it, and you deal with it, and you know, you move on.
And I think when you go through it yourself, I now, I've had people in the past going, oh, I'm going through a divorce. I'm like, oh, no. Oh, that's awful. Oh, I'm sure it'll work out. And you sort of have a quick coffee and then you walk off. Maybe it's somebody who's not obviously a close friend, but an acquaintance. And then when it happened to me, I was like, oh, my gosh, this is literally like someone has stabbed me in the heart.
Yeah,
this is awful.
Yeah.
And this feeling, that word, divorce or relationship breakdown or separation, is so much bigger now to me, and I have so much more understanding because I've been through it.
And I think time is a healer.
For sure.
Yeah. And if you say that to anybody at the beginning of a bereavement or a relationship breakdown, it feels a bit trite, doesn't it? It will get better in time, but it does get easier to deal with as time goes on, I think, as you move away from it a bit more.
Yeah.
And as I say, you might still then have times when all of a sudden, oh gosh, I feel that's quite painful again. But on the whole, you're moving forward. Yeah.
And I still get it. The boys, 16, nearly 17 and 18 now. And I think, oh my gosh, I still see them. Like they go and see their dad and they're packing things and sorting their bags out to go back and forth. And I still get that pang of guilt that they've had to live that way. It still makes me feel sad for them,
And why do you think that makes you feel sad?
Because that wasn't the dream.
No, but also, I guess you care very much about your boys.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And they're fine. They go, oh, Mum, gosh, I can't imagine. And the funny thing is now they go, oh, my God, I can't imagine you and Dad living together. And they just they're so honest about, obviously they're teenagers now and they're older. They're so honest about it. And I think, they do get it now, for sure. But and they know it was for the best. And myself and my ex-husband know it was for the best. He's very happy. I've got an amazing new partner who we are better suited than myself and my ex-husband. And my ex-husband would say that about him and his partner. We found people who we're more suited to, but because you've got children, you can end a relationship. And I always think, you can get married and you can get divorced and you never have to see that person again. When you've got children, they are in your life forever. And people go, oh, yes, well, until they're 18. And I'm like, well, no, not really, because there's a 21st birthday party, there's uni, there's graduations, there's weddings, there's christenings, there's the grandchildren that come. So you are always going to be connected to that person.
Yeah.
So the quicker that you can, the quicker you can get friendly or nice with each other. Respectful. Yeah, the word respectful. The better.
Yeah. I think,
it's not easy when you throw emotions.
No, it isn't.
And heartbreaking.
And actually, that's that emotion, those emotions, and that heartbreak is earlier on in the process. And as I say, it's not a linear process. In some respects, you do start to feel better as time goes on, but things will happen, and you'll feel, you might not feel so happy about it, or you might feel quite upset. Yeah.
We still annoy each other, my goodness, if he was sat here now, he'd say, she did this last week or this or she didn't do this. And, it is the way. And you do nitpick with each other for sure. But if you can, but then, it's very difficult. When a relationship's broken down, one of you is usually more upset than the other. One of you is usually a bit more angry than the other. I think it's not always balanced. So,
but those things might also change. I mean,
yes.
I guess, if you feel that, maybe you were more angry or your ex-husband was more angry, you don't actually know.
No.
You feel that you might be, but you don't actually know.
No, I don't know. No. Because we've never sat down and talked about it.
No. And I suppose, it would be easy to... relationships break down for all sorts of reasons.
Yeah.
And for some people, it might be a relief in the end that their relationship is over.
Yeah.
There are relationships that are so poor that, it is a relief for that person. But they then still probably have all these feelings of loss as well, regret, what could have been, what might have been.
Yeah. And then going forward, it's that putting yourself in that position again, this is the one I've struggled with, putting myself in that position again to possibly have that heartbreak again.
Yeah.
Now, you don't want to go into another relationship thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going to go through all that again. You want to go in positively. But you do always feel like, you know how that feels to have your heart broken and to everything fall apart. And I always used to say, my mum and dad used to say, oh, you'll meet someone lovely and da-da-da. And I'd say, no, I don't want to. I don't want to meet anybody else. I don't want to be with anybody else because I said I wouldn't survive. And I used to say to my mum and dad, if I had to go through this again, I don't think I've got the strength to go through this again.
And I suppose, you know, with love comes loss sometimes, doesn't it? I wonder if, you know, having been through a divorce, a relationship that didn't survive, do you think you're more aware of the things that might happen to prejudice the survival of that relationship? So you learn. Yeah.
You learn the hard way sometimes, and you learn by failing and by watching everything fall apart. It's like watching the house burn down in front of you, isn't it? You know, it's just like, oh my gosh, what could I have done differently? It was just devastating. But I've definitely gone into my relationship with Ben now, who is amazing. We've been together just over 4 years. Parking some things from my past relationship and not repeating patterns.
And do you think if something happened, you might be more likely to seek some support for your relationship rather than let it get to the
biggest
toxic
regret I've got is that we didn't sit down together with someone and try and work it out. Would it have worked out? Probably, looking back, I don't think it would. But I regret for me, but like I said to you, financially it wasn't possible. I do regret. I would have so benefited from sitting with you and just having someone to decompartmentalize it all.
Yeah. And I think, you know, the benefit of having some therapy, relationship couples therapy, might be that yes, your relationship survives, or actually you come to a stage where you both agree that this isn't going to last or work without the toxicity getting into it.
Yeah.
That's, you know, so it sounds to me like painful as it was, you've learnt a lot from.
I've learned so much about, the biggest learning that I've done has been about myself.
Yeah. And when you then go into another relationship, of course, you're taking yourself into that relationship. So it's really important that you've learnt about yourself.
And setting boundaries and setting things out early in the relationship of what makes you happy, what doesn't make you happy, what makes you feel really uncomfortable, what makes you smile, what you want to do in your free time. You know, I love musical theatre, I love the cinema. When I met Ben, I was like, these are the things that I really love that I didn't do for years and years. And they make me happy and they make me tick because they're creative and that's who I am. So if you're going to be with me and love me, like, I'm happy to do things you love. He loves cars and Formula One, and I'll stand in because I see him happy. And I think going into a relationship, I know what I love and I know what he loves. So, you know, it's a 50-50 thing. We do things for me and we do things for him.
Yeah. So you've learnt that. That's
totally learnt that.
Yeah. Do you want to have a think about, because we are thinking about what might be tips for...
Yes, please. Can we have some tips?
Manage. I was having a think about that really, and I think there are some practical tips that you could think about, and they won't be right for everybody, and some will suit and some won't. But I think the really important thing is to be kind to yourself, accept that this is hard, it's really painful, and you are going to feel, feel the pain. It won't be the same for everybody. You know, different people experience things in different ways. But one of the things that you did allude to is you do need to prioritise your own well-being. You know, you need to look after yourself.
Someone said that to me. They said, you're a mum, because I got very thin, being honest, very, very thin. I wasn't eating properly. I just wasn't hungry because I was really sad. And that happens. And somebody said to me, you need to put your life jacket on
Absolutely.
before the kids,
Yeah.
because you're running around for the kids, you're
Yeah.
running around for
Yeah.
everybody else, you're
Yeah.
trying to make everybody else happy. If you all jump in that sea
Yeah, you've got to be the one.
and the kids got their life jackets on, but you haven't, you're going to drown, then they're on their own. And I thought, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
you know,
That's a
you've
good
got, and
analogy.
that was my biggest regret, that I didn't prioritise myself early enough.
I think
I got
that's-
really poorly.
I think that's a really important analogy to use, actually. I often use the one of putting your oxygen mask
Yes.
on first, you know, like when you're on the thing on the plane, because you've got to have that on to be able to help others, and your children obviously were the people you wanted to help the most. So you do need to look after how, you know, your well-being in terms of what you eat. I think one of the easy thing to do is come home and have a glass of wine. Many people do that, done that myself.
Yeah.
It doesn't help in the long run, because, you know, you feel okay for the first glass of wine and then you feel awful after the next one. I think in terms of, you know, respectful communication, maybe a glass of wine or whatever, smoking or whatever you do, loosens you up, and you might you might say something you regret.
Yes,
I think
for
that's
sure.
a really important one to think about. Getting outside is a great idea. Walking, we know, you know, you got those feel good hormones that are released.
Bit of sun, even just a bit of sunshine, but even if it's raining, just the rain running over you, and just getting some fresh air is amazing.
I think when
and it's free.
Yeah, and when you're dealing with so many emotional things and so many things that are going on in the world, being actually anchored to the earth, actually feeling the rain, the wind on your face, it's grounding.
Yeah,
I think
we've learned so much about that lately, haven't we?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's really important to do that. Go outside, get fresh air. Walking's a great thing to do.
Love walking, listening to a good podcast, guys.
yeah. I think that's great. And I think walking and just noticing what's going on around you.
Yeah.
Start to, you know, I wonder sometimes, I think about myself when I've had times that have been difficult. When I start noticing, then I know I'm getting there.
Yeah. I noticed the birds.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'd say, oh, look, the little robin's there again. And, oh, look at those birds. And, oh, I can hear the birds. And like you said, that's because you've sort of opened yourself back up, because you're very, I'd describe it as you're very closed. I was closed and numb. Whereas when you feel like you're coming back to you a little bit, you notice the birds, you go, oh, my favourite song's on.
Yeah.
Whereas I probably wouldn't have even noticed my favourite song was on the radio.
Yeah. So that's great that you're noticing. It sounds, you mentioned your friend who said, actually, that's enough now. We've had enough now. I wonder at what point did your noticing tie in with her? So that's enough
probably
now.
at that point. I just needed tough love, and she's my tough love friend. She's been amazing. Like I'm saying that about her. She's an amazing friend. My gosh, she was there putting the bunk beds together with me in our little house for the boys and bringing food and everything for
like
me.
You needed that, and she recognised that
She did.
you needed that.
She did.
You needed
She's
that.
very intuitive in that way, and she knew that I needed
Yeah.
that. So, and I definitely did.
Yeah. So that's great. Reaching out to friends is a great thing to do. You know, trusted friends, people you know that you can trust, and have a conversation, or somebody who's there when you're perhaps feeling a bit lonely and you need somebody to have a little cry to. We talked about maintaining respectful communication. I think that's really important, and that, you know, had you been in some sort of therapeutic situation prior to, that would have been one of the things about you'd have learned quite quickly to go into that couples work. You need to be able to communicate and listen to one another. So if you can do that, that's great. Some people like joining groups of things that, you know, I don't know, support groups, or so that might be for some people, not for everybody. But also, if you're taking up new hobbies and things, people sometimes need to connect that way.
Yeah.
Because, you know, not everybody's probably as outgoing or connected as yourself, and they need something.
Or if you live away from family and friends.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, if you, especially if you live in the middle of London, you don't really know anyone.
Yeah.
It can be very isolating.
Yeah. And I think there are lots of things now, you know, there are choirs and things that people join, groups. That's great. Those sorts of things are really good, and, you know, get you some connection.
And I love creativity. The creativity side for me is fab.
Yeah.
Just putting a pen and pencil, doodling, you know, painting something, go
Yeah.
into something with live music. It does really lift you.
So you've recognised that those things are really good for you. Other people will have different things. It's about, you know, working out what works for each person. Yeah. One of the things I thought about more now that wouldn't have thought about 15, 20 years ago is social media. I think be careful of social media. Because, you know, like you said, being in the back of the car on the way to the wedding when everybody was happily and couples going to the wedding, you look on Facebook or whatever and it looks like everybody's having a great time.
The one thing for me was seeing a mum and dad and their kids. That broke me for a long time. And I started to feel a little bit, I think, look at them. Their perfect life and their perfect holiday. And I started to feel, being totally honest, resentful to people who looked like they had this perfect family life. And so sad that my kids didn't have that. And sometimes when you dig beneath the surface, one person, I'm not going to mention obviously a name, but one person who I thought had the perfect relationship messaged me and said, I wish I had the strength you did to end your marriage because I'm deeply unhappy, and it floored me.
Yeah, people don't know, you know, other people's relationships, but we put a persona onto the world, don't we?
Of course we do.
Want the world to see.
You don't want to post your ugly picture or your messy picture or your terrible day picture. You want to post the best. So you're seeing a tiny snippet of the best, and somebody looking through my Instagram or social media, everyone go, oh my gosh, you got such an amazing life. And I was like, God, I was stuck on a train for 8 hours day before yesterday trying to get home from work. I didn't post that.
No, and actually even before social media, you would have people, you know, presenting to the world as, you know, this is, you know, what's that phrase? As far as everyone else is concerned, we're a nice, normal family.
Exactly. And you never know what goes on behind closed doors. No. So don't always look and think, I wish I had what they had, because they might not have what you think they have.
So I think that what, you know, I'm trying to say is that, you know, if you look at Facebook or Instagram or whatever, those things, if that looks perfect, it's going to make you feel low and think, you know, I haven't
stop
got
the
that.
doom scrolling.
Stop that, yes.
Yeah, for sure. Comparing yourself.
Messy houses and
messy hair. And just concentrate on yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And be real. Yes, so sometimes we have to get through the day. So you know, it sounds like you worked out a way of doing it. A plan might be quite good, you know, for somebody who's really struggling or knows that they're going to struggle. I have a plan of what I do when I'm struggling, but I have to go to work.
Yes.
You know.
And recognising what you're doing when you're at your happiest and the people you're around when it's your happiest, and recognise the people you're around and the places you are when you're not happy and you're feeling anxious, and then maybe write that down. And I think that was a brilliant tip that one of my friends said to me. Just recognise who you feel safe and happy with, and recognise the people who you're with that are making you feel low, and don't put yourselves in those situations.
Absolutely. Give you permission, not yourself permission.
Boundaries.
To do that. Boundaries.
Say no.
Absolutely. So just like for you, going to QVC, you had to put the makeup on and the lovely clothes and look glamorous. You know, if you work in a different area, you know, I know times when I haven't felt great, I might put my best clothes on or, you know, put the makeup on. You know, people got to know when I was working, the smarter I looked, the worse things were.
Exactly. The more you're portraying your life is brilliant, the less chance that it is, to be honest.
Yeah. So I mean, not always, but you know, I think that if you can put yourself in a position where you feel, okay, I can present myself to the world and I can get through the day, because sometimes people have to get through the day. They can't stay at home.
No, you can't.
You've got to go out there.
Plus, I do think that's a good thing.
Yeah.
To push yourself out of the house.
Yeah.
Staying at home on your own is never a good idea. No. You need it sometimes because you need to reset and you need to get your strength back. But don't do it too much.
No. And for some people, they don't have the choice. You know, they've really got to go out there. I mean, it might be, you know, you might be, you know, say, well, give yourself a treat at the end of the day, or, you know, if you love going to the gym, I'm going to go to the gym when I've done my day. It's a personal thing. It's going to be different for everybody. We talked about finding something that brings you joy. and doing as much of it as you possibly can.
Yeah.
So that, you know, you might be having a bad day, but think, well, I'm going to be able to, you know, I don't know, paint my picture, do my play, whatever.
Yeah. I used to look forward to going to rehearsals to switch off.
And that's great because you experience the looking forward to.
Yeah.
And that's nice.
That was my little glimmer of light. And obviously seeing the kids coming home from school and things. And but you are kind of masking a lot with them because you have to. I didn't want to show them I was crying. You know, I'd cry when they went to bed or I'd cry when I went to the toilet.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. So find something that gives you joy that you can do. I think a really important message, and you said that you didn't do, obviously therapy can be expensive.
If somebody can't afford it, what would your tip be?
I think that there are all sorts of organisations. I think my top tip is if you're feeling really awful, go to your GP.
Okay.
Please reach out, you know, because, you know, your GP would be the person to think about where you could go. There are all sorts of organisations that would offer some help.
Yeah.
Psychologists can be a little bit expensive sometimes. It's because of the length of training, etc.
Yeah,
it's all
absolutely.
Of that. There are other people who are sort of less expensive. You just have to be careful that you get the right person for you and that they're properly trained. Psychologists are regulated by the Healthcare Professions Council. There are some amazing counsellors out there, but it's a slightly unregulated profession at the moment.
Okay.
So make sure you get somebody who's accredited, and there are all sorts of...
Are there charities available as well that you can speak to?
Yeah, I can't think of any off the top of my head in this area.
We'll list them underneath for people.
You know, I think if you feel really awful, you know, the Samaritans are there if you want to talk to somebody feeling really that, and there are listening. We can have a look at places you could phone.
Don't suffer in silence. There's no need, is there?
No. But your GP is there, and you know, different people need different things. Okay. That's really important that you do that. And I just want to say that, you know, I think you've said this over and over. When you're in it, you feel it's never going to improve, but actually...
You feel like this is your forever. Yeah. And I thought, I'm going to feel like this forever. And you don't.
No.
Anybody who's been through a relationship breakup, you don't feel like it months or years on. You really don't.
No.
You're in the trenches and you've just got to dig deep there for a little while, but you will crawl back out and you will be. And I feel for anybody listening to this who's gone through something similar to me, I am stronger, I am wiser. Mm-hmm. I know what makes me happy and I know what doesn't make me happy. And I've set my boundaries. Yeah. And I say no if I don't want to go to certain things, whereas before I'd go to everything because I didn't want to upset anyone. I will say no. And I can enjoy my own time. And I love myself. I love me again. I'm happy with me. I'm a nice person. And that's taken me a long time to say because I felt like a failure of a person. But I'm happy with me now.
And it sounds like you've done an awful lot of work on yourself in those 9 years.
It has been a lot of work.
Yeah. I think probably had you have been to speak to somebody, you know, a psychologist,
it would have been quicker, to be honest.
It would have probably set you off in a good, in the right direction for you. You know, things like this do take time. You know, you might still be, even if you'd have been to see somebody, you might have still set you off on that journey. Yeah. So, no, but it sounds like you've really learnt such a lot about yourself.
I have. And here we are, starting over. Brand new podcast, episode 1. You have been incredible. I nearly cried at the beginning of this episode. I'm not going to cry at the end because I'm super proud to be sat here. Thank you so much for being so fantastic. I am stronger and I've got my own podcast. So you can't come out the other end. And thank you so much for being with us.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you.
I hope you've enjoyed this episode, guys. Don't forget to subscribe, like and share and tell your friends about this brand new podcast, Starting Over. And we will see you on the next episode.